It was 3 in the morning, and I was sitting on the floor of a bathroom that cost more than most people's first home, marble imported from somewhere I never bothered to learn the name of, fixtures polished to a mirror finish, a shower built for a king, and I was sitting on the cold tile with my back against the wall and my knees pulled to my chest like a child. Not crying. I wish I had been crying. Crying would have meant I still felt something. I was just empty. And the strange, terrifying part? Everything was fine. By every measure the world recognizes, every dashboard, every metric, every headline, every number in every account. Everything was more than fine. Everything was exceptional. Everything was exactly what I had spent 15 years building toward, and I felt absolutely nothing. Music. Wait. Before you scroll, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is going to be one of those stories where a man loses everything and learns a lesson, a clean arc, a redemption, a bow at the end. This isn't that. This is harder than that. Because losing everything is obvious. When the floor collapses beneath you, you know to look for something to hold. You reach out by instinct. Survival does the work, but I hadn't lost anything. I had everything, and I was hollow inside it. That's a different kind of crisis. That's the kind nobody warns you about. That's the kind that has no language yet, because the people who survive it don't know how to explain it, and the people who don't survive it, well, they just keep building. They just keep building. Music. I built my first identity out of necessity. I was 7 years old when I understood that being useful was the price of love. Not stated, never stated, but absorbed. The way children absorb everything, through the air, through the silences between words, through what was celebrated and what was ignored. When I performed, when I achieved, when I brought home something to be proud of. I was held when I was confused or afraid or simply present without purpose. I was managed. So I learned that love is conditional on output. I learned that worth is demonstrated, not inherent. I learned that the safest version of me was the capable version, the one with answers, the one who didn't need, the one who solved. And I was very, very good at being that version. I thought that was a strength for 37 years. Turns out it was a prison I built myself, furnished myself, and then wondered why I felt so alone inside it. Music. I built a company before I understood what I was running from. I built a morning routine before I understood what I was avoiding. I built systems, frameworks, disciplines, structures. I read everything. Neuroscience, behavioral psychology, philosophy, stoicism, ancient texts, modern research. I optimized sleep, nutrition, focus, energy. I had a protocol for grief. I had a protocol for failure. I had a protocol for everything except the most fundamental question, which is, who are you when no one needs anything from you? I didn't know. I genuinely did not know. Music. Tell me something, and I need you to actually think about this, not just skim past it looking for the next interesting sentence. When was the last time you were with someone, truly with them, without half your mind already composing the next sentence, planning the next hour, calculating what comes after this moment? When was the last time you were fully, completely, irreducibly present? Not productive, not efficient, not performing presence while secretly somewhere else, just there, just there. Because here's what I learned, and it cost me years I cannot buy back. Presence is not passive. Presence is the most disciplined act a driven person can perform. It requires you to put down everything you built your identity around. It requires you to stop being impressive for 60 seconds. It requires a kind of courage that no productivity system will ever teach you, because productivity systems are built to keep you moving, and presence asks you to stop. Presence asks you to stop. And a man who has spent 3 decades running does not stop easily. Music. She wasn't what I expected. I want to be careful here, because the easiest mistake in this kind of confession is to make her a symbol, a metaphor, a story device. She was not a metaphor. She was a person, a real, complete, complicated, sovereign person who had her own history and her own wounds and her own architecture. And she did not arrive in my life to fix me. She arrived and stayed. That's it. That's actually the whole miracle. She just stayed, not because I was impressive. She had seen impressive. She was not moved by impressive, not because I was successful. She had her own success. She wasn't looking to borrow mine, not because I was charming or articulate or capable of constructing an argument out of thin air. She stayed when I was none of those things. She stayed when I was 3 in the morning on a cold bathroom floor, and she sat down beside me, not in front of me, not hovering above me with concern and solutions, beside me on the tile, with her back against the same wall, and she didn't say anything for a long time. Music. Do you know what it does to a man who has been performing competence his entire life when someone sits beside him in his incompetence and doesn't flinch? It breaks him, not cruelly, not destructively, mercifully. It breaks the performance, and the performance has to break before anything real can begin. Music. I thought I was afraid of failure. I was wrong. I was afraid of being known. Failure is public, but manageable. You can narrate failure. You can put a spin on failure. You can fail and still be the protagonist of the story, the resilient one, the one who gets back up, the one who learns and grows. Failure is almost safe because failure still lets you control the story. Being known is different. Being known means someone sees the narrative underneath the narrative. It means someone sits in the room where you constructed all your justifications and says quietly, without accusation, I see what you're doing. And you can't spin that. You can't optimize that. You can't build a framework around being seen. You can only decide whether to stay in the room. Most men I know, most driven, capable, successful, disciplined men, they've never stayed in that room. They've never let anyone stay long enough to see the architecture beneath the architecture, and they call it privacy. They call it strength. They call it not needing anyone. They are the loneliest people I have ever met. I was the loneliest person I have ever met. Music. Look at me for a second, not at the screen, at the meaning behind the screen, at what this moment actually is. You chose this. You chose to listen to this instead of 100 other things competing for your attention right now. Some part of you clicked here because some part of you recognizes what I'm describing. Not intellectually, not theoretically, personally, some part of you has sat on your own version of that bathroom floor, hollow inside a life that looked correct from the outside, and wondered, what is wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you. I need you to hear that. Nothing is wrong with you. You learned what you learned when you were young, and you built what you built with the tools you had, and those tools got you here, which is impressive, actually genuinely impressive, but they are not the tools for what comes next. What comes next requires something different. What comes next requires you to be willing to not have it together for a while. Music. Here's what I learned in the months after that bathroom floor. I learned that collapse is not the opposite of strength. Collapse is sometimes the most honest thing a structure can do. When a building's foundation is wrong, when the architectural premise is flawed from the ground up, it is not a failure for that building to come down. It is physics. It is logic. It is the material world being honest about what cannot hold weight. I had built an empire on the wrong foundation. The foundation was I am what I produce. And that foundation cannot hold a life. It can hold a career. It can hold a reputation. It can hold a bank account and a company and a morning routine and a 5-year plan, but it cannot hold a life. A life needs a different foundation. A life needs I exist before I achieve. I matter before I produce. I am allowed to need things. I am allowed to be afraid. I am allowed to not know. And laying that foundation is the work no one talks about because it is unglamorous and it is slow and it doesn't look like anything from the outside. It looks like therapy. It looks like long silences. It looks like conversations that go in circles. It looks like a grown man learning for the first time how to say, I'm not okay. I need help. I don't have an answer. I was wrong. I'm scared. It looks like nothing. It is everything. Music. She taught me the difference between an altar and a foundation. I had built her an altar. I want to be honest about this. I want to be specific about this because I think a lot of men do this without knowing they're doing it, and the damage is quiet and cumulative, and by the time it becomes visible, something essential has already been broken. I had placed her on a structure of my own construction, elevated, idealized, arranged to serve a narrative I needed. Not her narrative, mine. The narrative where I was finally capable of love. The narrative where my presence in her life was the evidence of my transformation. The narrative where she existed as proof that I had become someone worth loving. That is not love. That is possession dressed in the language of devotion. And she saw it, clearly, without drama, without a speech. She just said quietly one evening, I don't want to be your altar. I want to be your equal. And I didn't understand at first. I thought she was being modest. I thought she was deflecting the love I was offering. It took me a long time to understand that what she was offering me was more demanding, more real, and more terrifying than any altar. She was offering mutuality. She was saying, bring me your actual self, not your best self, not your performance, not the version of you that has read all the right books and knows all the right languages of intimacy. Bring me the version that is confused, the version that is petty sometimes and afraid often and uncertain about everything underneath the certainty. Bring me you. And I had to go find him first. Music. Don't deny it. I know you've done this. I know you've loved someone or tried to love someone from behind the glass, from a safe, managed distance, where you could be warm and present and generous and kind, but always with a hand on the exit, always with the part of you that matters held slightly back because that part, if it was known, if it was truly seen, might not be lovable, might not be enough. And the cruelest thing about that kind of love is that the other person can feel the glass. They can feel it. They might not name it. They might not even consciously register it. But somewhere in them, something learns that there is a room in you they are not allowed to enter. And they start to adjust. They start to love you around the boundary. And then you wonder why the love feels distant. You wonder why something is missing. You built the wall yourself, furnished the absence yourself, and then you mourn the closeness. I mourned it for years. Music. I want to tell you about the morning I started over, not the morning I had a revelation, not the morning I made a decision, not some cinematic dawn where everything crystallized and a new man emerged from the light. The morning I started over was unremarkable. I woke up. She was asleep beside me. The room was gray with early light, and I lay there for a moment, and I did something I had not done in perhaps a decade. I did nothing. I didn't reach for the phone. I didn't run through the day's priorities. I didn't mentally rehearse upcoming conversations or draft arguments I might need or calculate what needed to happen by noon. I just lay there in the gray light and I listened to her breathe and I thought, I am here, just this. And it lasted maybe 40 seconds before the pull toward productivity reasserted itself. But those 40 seconds were real. And the next morning I found 50 seconds. And the morning after that, a minute. This is not a metaphor. This is not a parable. This is the literal, mechanical, unglamorous truth of how a man who has spent his entire life optimizing away from presence learns to come back to it. 40 seconds at a time, one morning at a time, one choice to stay instead. Escape, one choice to feel instead of manage, one choice to be instead of perform, repeated imperfectly across weeks and months until slowly, imperceptibly, a new architecture begins to form. Not dramatic, not cinematic, not the kind of thing you can make a highlight reel of, just real music. Here's what I learned about the men who built things. We are very good at a specific kind of courage, the courage of action, the courage of risk, the courage of standing in front of a room and saying, I believe in this when no one else does, the courage of working when others sleep, the courage of getting back up. That courage is real. I am not dismissing it. It built the world we live in. But there is another kind of courage that most of us were never taught. The courage of stillness, the courage of need, the courage of saying, I am in pain, the courage of asking without certainty of receiving, the courage of being wrong and saying so, the courage of loving without guarantee, the courage of being a person instead of a force. I spent 37 years mastering the first kind of courage. I am still learning the second, and I will tell you honestly, the second is harder by a significant margin. Because the first kind of courage earns you things, it produces outcomes, it is rewarded by the world. The second kind just costs you the armor, it costs you the performance. It costs you the comfortable distance between your curated self and your actual self, and you don't know when you start paying that cost what you'll be left with. You just have to trust that. Something true will be left. Music. Something true was left. I want to be careful not to make this triumphant too early because the triumphant version is dishonest. The triumphant version skips the middle part, which was messy and uncomfortable and had several false starts and at least 2 moments where I was certain I was doing everything wrong. But something true was left. A man who could sit at a dinner table without his mind halfway to tomorrow. A man who could hear difficult things without immediately constructing a defense. A man who could say, I don't know, and feel the weight of it without needing to immediately fill the silence with something impressive. A man who could be loved without immediately asking himself what performance earned it. A man who, slowly, imperfectly, with significant ongoing effort, was learning to live inside his own life instead of just administrating it from a safe remove. That man is not finished. He is not complete. He is not the final version, but he is real. And for the first time and perhaps ever, he is actually here. Music. She said something to me once that I have turned over in my mind every single day since we were sitting outside late evening and I had been quiet for a long time. Not the strategic silence of a man thinking through a problem, but the genuine quiet of a man who had run out of things to prove. And she looked at me and said, you know what I love most about you? And I braced, because I have been told what people love most about me, and it is always the thing I built, the thing I achieved, the thing I produced. And I was so tired of being loved for my output. She said, the way you look, when you forget to be impressive. Music, I cried, not dramatically, not a collapse. Just quietly, genuinely, in the way that water finds the lowest point, I cried, because no one had ever said that to me, because I had spent my entire life working not to look that way, because the thing she loved most was the thing I had been most afraid to let her see, and I thought, what else have I been hiding that might be worth something? Music. Here's what I learned about the difference between an empire and a home. An empire is built outward. It expands, it impresses, it requires more land, more resources, more scale, more conquest. Its logic is perpetual growth. Its health is measured in how much territory it holds. And it never stops, because stopping feels like dying, and so it keeps moving, and the man at its center keeps moving with it, and the moving becomes the identity, and the day it stops is the day he doesn't know who he is anymore. A home is built inward. A home is not impressive from outside. A home does not require expansion. A home's metric is warmth. Is there enough light? Is there enough safety? Can the people inside breathe? Can the people inside be known? Can someone in this place put down what they're carrying and just rest for a moment? An empire requires you to be a king. A home requires you to be a person. I had spent my whole life building an empire. I had never learned to build a home. Music. The bricks are different. I need you to understand this. Because you might be thinking, I'll build the empire first and then build the home. I'll achieve first and then arrive at presence. I'll optimize everything first and then I'll slow down and learn to be here. That is the most expensive mistake a driven person can make. Because the bricks are different. The skills that build an empire are exactly the skills that prevent you from building a home. The habits of ambition, the forward motion, the insatiable assessment of what comes next, the inability to accept good enough, the compulsion to improve, those habits will dismantle a home brick by brick while you're not paying attention. You cannot optimize your way into intimacy. You cannot schedule presence. You cannot produce your way to being known. You have to learn a different set of tools. And here is the unbearable part. You have to learn them while you're still building everything else. You don't get to pause. Life does not offer you a contained apprenticeship in being human. You have to do both at once. You have to run the empire and build the home simultaneously, and the home will always lose unless you make it the foundation, the actual foundation, beneath everything, not the thing you get to when the real work is done. The home is the real work. Everything else is just scaffolding. Music. Wait. Before you go, I know we're near the end of this, and I know the part of you that consumes content is already calculating what comes next. The next video, the next insight, the next piece of information that might be the one that changes everything. I need you to stay here for 30 more seconds. I need you to stay in this moment and ask yourself one question, not as an exercise, not as content, as a real question to yourself about your actual life. Who knows you? Not who follows you, not who respects you, not who is impressed by you or depends on you or benefits from you or looks up to you. Who knows you? Who has seen the version of you that sits on the bathroom floor? Who has seen you without the performance? Who has heard you say, "I'm not okay," and stayed? Who have you let inside the architecture, into the room beneath the room, into the actual house that exists behind the impressive exterior? And if the answer is no one, I am not asking that to shame you. I am asking that because I was that answer for 37 years. I was no one's answer. And the loneliness of that, the specific suffocating loneliness of being surrounded by people who admire a performance while the person behind it is invisible even to himself. That loneliness is the quiet catastrophe at the center of so many capable lives. You do not have to keep paying that cost. Music. I am not going to tell you what to do. I am not going to give you a 5-step framework or a morning practice or a protocol for emotional availability. I spent enough of my life in protocols. I know their limits. I will tell you what I did. I started telling the truth in small ways, not in dramatic confessions, not in tearful revelations, in small, daily, terrifying moments of honesty. I said I'm not sure when I wasn't sure, instead of performing certainty. I said that hurt when something hurt, instead of managing it away. I said I need you when I needed someone, instead of constructing elaborate self-sufficiency to avoid the vulnerability of needing small truths, daily, not a transformation, a direction, not an arrival, a turning, and slowly enough that I almost didn't notice, slowly enough that some days I was certain nothing was changing, I became slightly more available to my own life, slightly more present, slightly more capable of receiving what was actually already there. Music. She didn't save me. I want to be clear about that because the version of this story where she saves me is a lie, and it is a lie that would dishonor everything she actually did, which was harder and more valuable than saving me. She witnessed me. She stayed present while I found my way back to myself. She did not pull me. She did not push me. She did not fix the broken architecture or demolish the wrong foundation herself. She sat beside me on cold tile at 3 a.m, and she breathed and she waited, and she said once, "I'm not going anywhere. Take as long as you need." That is not rescue. That is love, actual love, not the transaction I had learned in childhood, not the conditional approval I had spent 37 years performing for, not the admiration of an audience or the validation of a market. Love, the kind that stays after the performance ends, the kind that doesn't need you to be extraordinary, the kind that knows your actual name, not the name on the achievement, not the name attached to the output, but the name of the person who sometimes doesn't know what he's doing and sometimes makes the wrong call and sometimes sits on bathroom floors in the middle of the night and needs, truly and simply needs, to not be alone. That is what she gave me, and it was without question the most destabilizing and transformative gift I have ever received. Music, I rebuilt, not the empire, the home from the foundation. And the foundation this time is not performance. The foundation is, I am here, I am real, I need things, I can offer things. I am afraid sometimes, and I do not have to hide that. I am capable, and that capability is in service of something that actually matters. Not the metrics, not the scale, not the impression, but the actual warmth of the actual people in my actual life. That is the foundation. And on that foundation, day by day, brick by imperfect brick, I am building something I could not have imagined when I was sitting on that bathroom floor. Not a monument, a home, music. Look at me for one last second. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not too late. You are a person who learned what you learned when you were young, and you built what you built with those lessons. And you have arrived here at this moment, at this question, because some part of you always knew that what you were building was not quite the thing you were looking for. The thing you were looking for is closer than the next achievement. It is not louder, it is quieter, it is not faster, it is slower. It is not more impressive, it is more honest. It is the person who knows you. It is the moment you let yourself be known. It is the 40 seconds of genuine presence before the pull of productivity returns. It is the small truth spoken when the safe lie was available. It is the choice, made daily, to be a person inside your life instead of a manager of it. That is the work. That is the real work, and you already know how to work. Music. I risked everything. Not a company, not capital, not reputation, myself. I risked being seen. I risked the possibility that what was underneath the performance was not enough. I risked being known without guarantee of being kept. And here is what I found on the other side of that risk. In the quiet of a gray morning with someone breathing beside me and 40 seconds of actual presence stretching into something that might slowly become a life. It was enough. I was enough. Not despite the confusion and the fear and the years of wrong foundation. Because of the willingness to finally let it be seen. You are enough, not the performance. You